very pleased today we've got Peter Tatchell to say a few words of superbly. He knows how much I admire him. He's a superbly innovative, courageous campaigner. And he's going to say a few words. So I'll speak, Peter, and then I think if you've got reeds or other things to lay, we'll do that as a little gesture, and then we'll have a 2-minute silence. We don't have a complicated device for marking out the silence, but we've got to watch. So those of you wearing the purple copy, which is quite a few of you, it's good to see, thank you. It commemorates as you, can you hear me okay? It commemorates as you know the suffering of millions of animals around the world, a consequence of the inability of human beings to settle their differences without guns and bombs and slaughter. We launched the purple poppy 5 years ago to a bit of an uncertain reception. The first year we produced 1,000. This year 40,000 were ordered, so it's taking off. It's taken off in Canada, 1 or 2 states in America. Along with our purple poppy wreath, lots of peas, the purple poppy is also displayed in sites of First and Second World War battles in France and Belgium. I mean, it's available from our office, but it's also to be found in vets, animal sanctuaries, health shops, shopping centres, 1 or 2 supermarkets, so it's taking off. I think clearly the public is beginning to recognise the suffering of animals in war, and this quite extraordinary monument is further testament to that. But what we've got to guard against is seeing these animal victims as somehow fallen heroes. The dogs, the rats, the pigeons, the horses, the dolphins, the mules, the camels, the elephants, and all kinds of other animals that have been co-opted into the war efforts of so many countries were not heroes, they were victims. And they didn't give their lives to the cause, their lives were taken from them. Many of them, of course, died as a result of their wounds, but many were simply abandoned when their usefulness was over. For instance, a large number of mules were abandoned on the beaches of Dunkirk when the much celebrated retreat, or should we call it the evacuation, of the British Expeditionary Force took place. And thousands of dogs co-opted into the fight by the Americans against the Viet Cong. They were simply jumped when that project was finished, left to fend for themselves. And that's why I'm deeply sceptical about initiatives such as the Dickens Medal, awarded to animals, quotes, who show conspicuous gallantry or devotion to duty. However well-intentioned the organisers of such awards, those animal victims didn't give their lives. As I say, their lives were taken from them. And it's not just animals who are drafted directly into the front line of battle and suffer the consequences of human conflict. When battles start and people flee, animals are left to starve in farms, in zoos, and in people's homes. And they're left to starve and cry out for water, and they must also face the terrifying din of gunfire and explosions. I mean, we've just gone through the fireworks season, hopefully it's over. That is terrifying enough, has been enough for animals. Battle can be firework night amplified 1,000 times. Now, what of the future? We no longer send pigeons to and from battle zones with messages, but the new generation of animal slaves, and I think we have to call them animal slaves, are even more thoroughly manipulated and controlled. I'm talking about animals who are selectively bred, who were trained under extreme psychological and physical duress. Animals who have gadgets attached to their bodies or implanted into their brains so that they can be directed, punished and rewarded at the tap of the keyboard. I'm sorry this is all bad news, but these are the facts we know. And then we got the animals who were subjected to the warfare experiment. In preparation for Yam More, but most of it takes place, as you probably appreciate, in Porton Down. We don't know much about what goes on. There's a lot of secrecy, the typical MOD secrecy, but we do know these activities are appallingly cruel and they've got to stop. War is hell, said the American Civil War General William Sherman. War is hell. I used to hear that and think that's pretty trite. Why is that quoted over and over? War is hell. And then of course I came to understand the war really does let loose the devil in man, or whatever you want to call it. And animals we proclaim here today suffered grievously as a result of it. General Sherman also said, war is at best barbarism. War is at best barbarism. Its glory is all moonshine. And of course that's true as well. What we want is an end to the glorification of war, isn't that a fact?
Yeah.
We want no more animal or human victims. We want an end to war, isn't that a fact?
Yes.
And our purple poppy and the growing recognition of the suffering of animals and the growing debate, the internet, which increases debate and opposition to war, we have to hope, we have to do what we can to make things happen positively. So thank you for coming, and it's my pleasure to introduce Peter Tatchell.
We're pleased to be here to join you today. I want to start by just telling you a story about my grandfather. He was a farm boy in the outback of Australia at the turn of the 20th century. And he was marched off to war to serve king and country. He was sent halfway around the world with only a few weeks of basic training, and then was plunged into the front line at Passchendaele. And the very first time he went over the top, he was shot through his legs. The bullet went through both legs. And he lay in that trench for 3 days and nights, a trench of stinking water up to his waist, before he was eventually evacuated. When I was a young boy, I used to ask him about this experience, and he told me just how horrific it was. He said, whatever you do, never glorify war. Never think that war is something good or worthwhile. It is a nightmare. Now the point is, he was able to tell me this. The animals can't. They can't give their testimony. Their stories, their experiences are unknown and unheard. So that's why our remembrance here today is so important, to say that we do have some sense of the suffering that animals have been put through in war and in preparation for war. And that we do remember not just the way they were abused, but we vow to try and stop it in the future. When I think about the way animals have been used in war, I guess this statue here of a donkey with a pack horse, horse with a gun wheel, that must have been pretty typical, I think, of my grandfather's experience in the First World War, the way in which animals were used to cart military equipment, ammunition, and indeed men and wagons. But we know, of course, even today, this process of abuse continues. Animals are regularly used to test munitions on, to test for chemical and biological warfare. and unknown thousands, tens of thousands, possibly millions of animals have been used by countries around the world to test their weapons, and are still being used to test their weapons, including horrific weapons like chemical and biological warfare. We know that for the sake of all the people, military and civilian, who have suffered in war, and for the sake of all these animals that have suffered in war, that we must do our utmost to try and prevent war. And it shocks me gravely that this year the countries of the world will spend about $1 trillion on weapons and warfare. $1 trillion on weapons and warfare this year, as they did last year, as they will do next year. And yet we have on this planet not only millions of humans being abused, 1,000 million people woke up this morning with no safe clean drinking water, but also tens of millions of animals are being abused in experimentation. And maybe if just some of that money that was being spent on weapons and warfare could be used to devise humane methods to research new drugs and medical treatments, then animals wouldn't need to suffer in that way. And likewise, if we can move towards a world where we solve conflicts and disputes without resort to war, then in the future animals will not have to suffer and be victims as they have in the past. So I guess that's our testimony today. Remembrance, but also a vow to work to ensure that animals and people in future will not suffer the degradations, the humiliations, the sufferings and the death that inevitably come from war. Thank you.